we are in the second seminar of a series where we're talking about assessing core competencies at Texas A&M. And we mentioned in the first seminar, it's kind of one of those things that everybody owns but nobody owns. It's hard to get it going. We talked about university structure, sometimes making it tough. You know, who's really doing this thing? Is it the provost office? Is it the faculty senate committee? Is it an assessment committee? Is it, you know, where are these things being handled? And so after that conversation, we talked about, we don't use the words qualitative and quantitative as much in our assessment world. We talk more about direct measures and indirect measures. And so what I like to do when I think of that is a direct measure is the student shows the work. You see the student's work. An indirect measure is the learning. The indirect measure is the student tells you about what they think they learned. Survey, exit interviews, etc. And one of the things that we need to try to do is make sure that in our assessment processes we have some direct measures for student learning. Basically, direct evidence. I even prefer the word evidence over measures these days because I think it really gets more at the heart of what we're doing. We're looking for direct evidence of student learning that we can show our constituents. So that being said, this particular seminar is going to talk about 3 initiatives at the university that are underway that are direct sources of evidence for student learning in the core competencies. So, first of all, I want to thank our cooperative sponsors. This group is sort of part of a very informal group called the Teaching and Learning Cooperative at the university. We like to get together and just touch base, make sure the right hand sort of knows what the left hand is doing. And we're very grateful to the participation of all these offices to kind of come together to have this conversation. And I do want to just simply remind us at the beginning of this seminar, and we talked about it in the first one, is this is the standard of our regional accreditor that we're actually addressing with some of this direct sources of evidence of student learning business for the core competencies. And it's simply this: the institution identifies college level / university level general education competencies and the extent to which graduates have attained them. Because in some of these projects, you'll see a concentration on what happens at the level of exit from the university and trying to get that evidence gathered up. And the reason for that has a lot to do with this. So that just to kind of understand where we're coming from on that. And these are the 4 competencies. These competencies, again, we mentioned in the last seminar, are competencies that the Core Curriculum Council looked at, that when Gates was here, it was part of the Enhancing the Undergraduate Experience report. It's actually an appendix in that report. When the Morano report came out with her 6 big ideas, these things were also considered. The Education Environment Council has vetted these. The Assessment Advisory Group has vetted these. The Inquiry Research-Based Education Group has vetted these, and President Morano last summer signed off on these. However, in the interim, we have a new provost, and we're working on an academic roadmap, so I expect them to continue to be vetted, which is a good thing. Oftentimes, you don't see a lot of change from being a good citizen and communicating well and being ethical, which are at the heart of our outcomes here. But we may continue to vet them and line them out even better. So then, we are going to talk about 3 projects today. One is this capstone analysis project for writing, and it will be measuring outcome 3. It will be part of the sources of evidence to prove outcome 3, which is related to communication. And then also, we will talk about the critical thinking assessment test, which is related to outcome 2, although to tell you the truth, we'll probably think about it in terms of communication and critical thinking by the time we get finished with that project. But we're right in the middle of the heart of that project right now. And then the third project you're going to hear about today is the Student Leader Learning Outcomes Project, which you'll find has a really beautiful breadth to it and a great tie-in to the co-curricular. And we have people here from Student Life Studies that are going to talk about that. And that will be addressing actually 3 of the 4 outcomes. So, without further ado, let's start with the Writing Assessment Project Pilot.
I'm Amber Malinowski. I'm the Assistant Director here in Assessment, and I've been working on the Writing Assessment Project Pilot. We're still kind of in our early stages, but what we've done is we decided that to get at that outcome, we wanted to collect some student writing, more than we needed, and then pull a sample from that, and then get a group of faculty graders together to score it with a rubric. And Valerie will talk more about that rubric in a second. So what we were looking for were upper division capstone or upper division W courses, and we wanted individual writing assignments of approximately 5 to 10 pages. We've had to back off that a little bit, and we've actually gone down to kind of a word count, 500 or more words, something kind of like that, so that we could include memos and lab reports and things like that. And we wanted assignments that could be scored by a rubric that would be for more of a general audience. So that's kind of what we were looking for. We sent out an email to lots of different professors and instructors and got several of them to volunteer. The papers will be scored next semester. We're collecting right now, and if you would like to participate, if you've never heard of it before and you'd like to help us out, it's not too late. I see several of you in the audience who are already helping us out, and we appreciate that. We hope to have at least 20 faculty members form teams to score the papers so that each paper will be scored by 2 people, and then, if necessary, a 3rd person. And feedback from this project will be in the form of an aggregated report with no identifiable information, and we hope to have that sometime within the next year, depending on. We've never done this before, so we're kind of learning as we go too, but we have contacted other universities, and we're trying to structure it similar to what they've done, what they have found has worked. So far, we have these colleges participating, which is just about everybody, so we're really excited about that. And based on enrollment, what people told us they thought they could give us, we'll have a little over 1,200 papers. We don't plan on scoring all of those. Ideally, we'd like to have at least 50 from each college, which looks pretty realistic at this point. And one of the additional benefits of doing this is it will allow us to learn about the benefits of our W course program, which we're all very interested in. So that's kind of where we're at with that right now. We're still in collection right now.
One of the issues on the critical thinking and on the rubric is that we're working with authentic data because we're not asking people to sit down and take a test. We're using samples that they've had time to revise, that they've worked on over time, which is more authentic in some ways than just a timed writing test. But the problem with that is they've all written to different prompts, and they've all written for different expectations. Of course, we're only looking at how well they've done at a general level, and we're not like, it's not, it would be invalid if we were then taking that back to their performance in the class, but we're not. We're looking at very general kinds of skills. But when you use a rubric that breaks it down, you may have some papers that are informative or expository, others that are argumentative. So making that rubric generic enough to be meaningful is proving to be a big challenge. And that means that some of them may or may not evidence critical thinking, or critical thinking that's evaluative versus critical thinking that's analytical or synthetic. So that makes it hard, but I still think that it's a really good place to look for critical thinking, because that's what writing's about. And so I'm beginning to think that this rubric may not work too well, and we may want to go to a more holistic score, where what you do is say meets expectations, exceeds expectations, doesn't meet expectations, but you have to train your raters very well. They have to have anchor papers that they all look at and discuss and say this paper is fairly representative of what we want to see. So these are just difficult issues that we are now trying to figure out, and I would welcome your suggestions and comments.
Unless you're going to have something like discipline-specific readers on such things as rule of evidence and rule of that, and that might work. And especially since you're going to have other instruments or other, it's not clear to me if I'm assessing the university for critical thinking that the sample of W courses is even the right group to be looking at in the first place.
Yeah.
They may want to just stick writing for writing and then something else for critical assessment in another way.
Well, yeah, except that I can't separate critical thinking completely out of writing. You know, we can look, if you mean by writing simply grammar, that's a really impoverished notion of writing. So that's a problem, because we want to know that they can organize thoughts and develop thoughts and provide some kind of important content. We want to know more than just that they have good grammar.
All that's in there, but then William Blake would go down like smoke under those rules.
Not necessarily. It depends on how you train your rater. So there are some things you can do, but you have to stay on a very general education level. And we can't do discipline specific because then our pool would be too small.
Yeah, I was just down 3 pages.
I think we'll be able to kind of handle some of the generic differences, but one of our only ways to do this might be to work with faculty who have some background in teaching writing, because they're able to deal with those generic differences. So we haven't figured that out either.
So what standards they're holding themselves up. So I teach a totally front-loaded exposition similar to yours. In other classes, that's wholly inappropriate.
Yeah.
So then if we basically have, we're judging mooses by moose juice and gooses by goose juice.
I think that would work really well with a holistic scoring, too. Yeah. I kind of like that idea. That makes sense to me.
This critical thinking assessment test was brought to my attention actually by Janie Shelock. We went together to last summer to the Sachs Institute of Quality Enhancement and Accreditation, and discovered Barry Stein there, who is doing an NSF-funded project on trying to assess critical thinking, something that all the universities are trying to tackle. And he basically wrote a grant to get going on it. And we are now partnering with Tennessee Tech on this endeavor. And we sent 4 of our faculty and staff to be trained in Chicago, and that's Nancy Simpson, Amber Malinovsky, Rhonda Gray, and then someone that can't be here today, Prudence Martin. And so I'm going to let Nancy talk just a little bit about what she experienced in Chicago and what she learned about the process and what some of the potential benefits are.
I have the overview DVD also, which will explain some of the particulars and a little bit about how the test was developed. So I will just talk about the value of this particular test as I saw it, and what it asks students to do is to analyze critically particular scenarios that are likely to be in the kind of general citizenship category, maybe general health and medicine kinds of things, or so that there will be scenarios developed, and it asks them to decide if what information is relevant, what kind of inferences they can make based on the information given, and it's a short answer essay kind of a test. The true value of it, from my perspective, was that it is faculty scored. So you bring faculty together, and as a group of faculty, you get to look at what our students were able to do or not do on this test, and it's scored by means of a rubric. And so, in addition to providing us evidence about what our students can and can't do, it provides an opportunity for faculty to say, gosh, if they can do this, that's wonderful. If they can't, what are we going to do next? How do we bring these particular skills into our classrooms more explicitly?
We have given the test to 170 seniors so far. We emailed every senior at the university. Yes, it's a convenient sample, but guess what? We don't have the authority to make anybody take a test. So we don't have that authority. We're going to have a convenient sample. But we have 113 scheduled to come tonight, and so I'm really crossing my fingers to get close to 300. And we have 2 faculty grading sessions already arranged, one on the 10th and one on the 11th of December, with Nancy and Prue Merton operating the December 10th session, and Rhonda and Amber operating the December 11th session. So I'm really excited that we're able to actually have our data very soon. Also, in terms of this test and how faculty feel about it, this test for Texas A&M anyway was vetted through the inquiry group, also through all of the assessment liaisons at all the colleges, and in terms of it being a reasonable alternative for gathering the kind of evidence that we want regarding critical thinking, most people thought, golly gee, we're partners with Tennessee Tech, what do we have to lose? Let's give this a go. So, when we look at what's available out there, this seemed to be the best direction for us to go in. Right now, what we'll be doing is vetting it through our assessment liaisons and our inquiry group, which are the 2 groups we have. If we could get this academic roadmap bunch interested in this kind of data, I would be so excited to share that with, that kind of a group. So, again, we're really, this is based on that first chart we saw in Seminar 1. Universities this size are generally not structured for an easy way to get this kind of thing done. So we're working, and if you have specific suggestions, we're all ears. We actually experimented with some sampling early on with this project, and discovered about 3 business days before our first administration that strategy was failing miserably. And so to compensate for that miserable failure, Amber here and I emailed every senior in the university, and then she manually managed each one of them. Oh, yes, Jake, please come on the 10th, And that's how we got this to happen. That's how we got 300 test takers, or almost 300 test takers. It's really not intended for student level anything. And we don't have a motivation for that at all. We're looking for institutional level information. We do get that question during the administrations, and some of the kids do seem to be a little bit sad that they don't get to know, but that's just not the direction we're going with this. We have been honored, though, that they have, I'll tell you, it's something to see, something about the Aggie spirit. I'm not kidding you. They come in and they really do take it seriously, so we've been excited about that. Yes, ma'am.
I want to mention that, in the same vein, that if you want to do writing assessment that is discipline specific, English has been doing that for a while, looking at their own writing using a rubric, and I'll help you do that within your program, within your department, within your college.
And we have 15 minutes to hear about the student leader learning outcomes in the co-curricular and how they associate with our university level outcomes. And so let's move to Peggy and Katie.
Hi, I'm Peggy Halsweiss from Student Life Studies, and this is Katie King from the Morrell Student Center Complex. And we're going to talk to you about the Student Leader Learning Outcomes project that we've been working on for several years. It's an ongoing project, so we're in our 3rd, 4th year. I'm losing track now. I'm going to give you a brief history of our project, turn it over to Katie to give some examples of how these things are being used, and then I'll finish up with how we are trying to assess this as an ongoing project. In the summer of 2005, we brought in faculty, and we conducted focus groups with them, and we asked them in a nutshell, what is it that students need to learn in your discipline to be successful that you don't have time to teach them in the classroom? And what we got was this long list of skills. And that simultaneously, we were also talking to advisors in the Division of Student Affairs, and we asked them, in your student organizations, with the student leaders you see, what kinds of skills do you think they should learn? The 2 lists came together quite nicely. And so what we decided to do was to create some outcomes for what we think student leaders should be learning from their organizational experience, their leadership experiences, the students that we work with most often and spend a lot of time with and guide. So we took about 1.5 years and developed outcomes for each of our major skills, and you can see them listed under the learning themes on the PowerPoint. Those are the ones that we have right now. Once we developed some outcomes of what do we think our students should know or be able to do at the end of their organizational leadership experience with us, we then developed some rubrics, which you have a sample of 4 in front of you, and we're going to talk about a few of those. We made sure that each of our rubrics had literature and research behind it. We didn't just go in and said, well, this sounds nice. We wanted to make sure that we knew what the relevant issues were in that particular skill area at that time. We have done some revisions of them from this summer. We're in the middle of the second full year of widespread use in the Division of Student Affairs with some of these rubrics. And so we're starting to learn a little bit more about what's working and what's not working with our students. So we are still in the process of revising them. We will probably do so again next summer once we learn more from advisors and student leaders who are currently using them. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie, who's going to talk to you about some examples of how these rubrics are being used right now.
Like Peggy said, we had been working on this project for about 1.5 years, and we hadn't yet put into place a system where we were using the rubrics and the learning outcomes with our students. I am much more of a doer than a thinker, if you know me. I feel a little intimidated in this room, but so I actually took one of the rubrics, the project management rubric, with an organization that I advise, MSC FISH, which is one of our freshman leadership organizations. And I talked to my student leaders about it. The way the organization is broken down as we have a chair and a vice chair who are the top 2 student leaders, and we just had conversations and how can this fit with what the goals that we have set for this committee and the things that we would like the student leaders in this organization to learn throughout their process. The exec team is juniors, so we had 5 juniors. We had, at that time, 12 sophomore assistant directors, and then the general members are freshmen. So we only use this rubric with the leadership, so the sophomores and the juniors. And it was a self-evaluation at various staff meetings throughout the semester. We would have the students rate themselves on where they just felt like they fit in the project management rubric, and I think you have an example. It works very nicely for FISH because they do several small programs throughout the year, and they're able to look and relate to it. Okay, did I set my goals? Did I initiate a task? Did I follow through? Did I communicate well? And they could have something to measure it against. And then we collect that, and as a group of 3, the chair, the vice chair, and I, we also rated them. And then we set up one-on-one meetings with each student and just did a feedback session. My favorite part of this process has been watching the chair and the vice chair develop skills they never even thought. They're getting so many opportunities to give that critical feedback, that peer-to-peer interaction, that I'm really just kind of being able to sit back and watch them and have these really wonderful, valid conversations with their peers and the learning that takes place. I think Peggy will talk a little bit about some focus groups that they've done with FISH since then, and that they talked about how they've really enjoyed the process more than I actually thought that they would, but they made instant changes. I really did see them start to set goals and to think critically about the decisions that they were making, taking it into the classroom, and really seeing, oh my gosh, I'm learning this in the classroom. How can I use this in FISH? And so it was a really wonderful pilot experience. They were the first organization that used it. Since then, they've done this year after year. It's become part of the culture. It's just, okay, how are we going to do it this year? And every year it's changed. Every year I've let the leadership kind of dictate how they would like to facilitate this with their peers, but it's been a very valuable experience for them, something very tangible, something that they've been able to improve the writing and their resumes, how they're articulating what they're learning when they're applying for internships or just other leadership positions, or in the classroom when they're talking to the professors. They feel more confident, and they're able to really discuss the skills that they're learning in their co-curricular activities. One of the nice things about the project is that you can facilitate the rubrics any way that fits with your organization. For another committee that I advise, hospitality, this semester they used one of the communication rubrics, the verbal communication, and they simply, the chair and the vice chair, just noticed that in our general committee meetings that the execs that were giving announcements about the programs and the service projects that we were involved in, that they were just going up in there and saying, hey, yeah, we got the service project, and it's really cool, and you should come, and yeah, it's awesome, so be there. And they weren't giving any information, and they were pausing and using like and not really paying attention, and their slides were all jumbled up. And so they just got copies of them, passed them out in front of them, and said, this is where you are. You're all novice. We need you to all be advanced. And so I thought it was funny how they chose to use it as opposed to FISH. They used it really as a guide, and they have since made improvements on their own on the slides and their presentations because they had something tangible in front of them and realized, wow, Kayla and Charlie are right. We probably should be a little bit more intentional in the way that we're giving these announcements. So that's just 2 examples of the way that I'm facilitating it with my students, but it has been a really wonderful project. And I think in it, we do have a critical thinking rubric, but I think critical thinking is just happening because of it. That's terms that my student leaders are using now on their own. They are being able to see and make decisions that I would normally have made, but they can recognize it when before they hadn't. And I really do think it's because of their use with learning outcomes and thinking of their development in a learning outcomes language. After the first year that FISH used it, we had 5 of those students become members of our MSC Council, which is the highest that you can get within our organization, and that had never really happened before. And so I think it gave them a confidence. I think that gave them, like I said, a language to be able to articulate what they were learning. And so been a really wonderful tool. It's made my job easier.
So I'm going to finish up by talking about how we are trying to assess this project, because we are coming at it from a lot of different directions. From the student standpoint, we are partnering with the Career Center, and we are trying to move in the direction of having students post these rubrics that are filled out by their peers or by their advisor, or even self-evaluations, post them with some explanations within their e-portfolios. And so we are trying to move them towards a resource we already have so they can begin tracking what they're doing in the co-curricular and document their skills as they go along. From the side of the advisors, we are doing a lot of interviews and focus groups right now. We are conducting an online survey this year for the advisors who are actually using rubrics. And we are conscious of the fact that it's changing how we work. As Katie said, it's made her job easier, and we are finding that out, that it might be a little bit of work to start implementing it, but when the students buy into this and they see how it can be helpful and very directive towards their skill building, they latch onto this and they take it and run with it. And it gives us all a language to speak to them for. You know, if I am advising an organization and one of Katie's former students comes to me, I pull out the same rubric. It's the same language, the exact same thing they've seen before. So we are coming out a common language which we did not have before. It's also helping us to kind of look at students in a certain way and say, how can we help them grow while they're in this organization with us? And we may not get them from novice to advanced in one organization, but as they're coming to us from freshman to senior year, maybe we can move them along in their student organization skills. Another area that we are looking at is supervisors of advisors, because one of the things that this project has done is kind of a grassroots project. And so it's bubbling up from those of us who are kind of in the trenches with our student leaders. And as you go up the administrative chain, you're less likely to interact with students on a day-to-day basis. And so you may not understand as a supervisor exactly what is happening with these rubrics and why it's important or how students are interacting with them. So we are trying to also assess some of the supervisors, and does it take a supportive supervisor? If so, what does that support look like? Is it something that should be in performance reviews or annual evaluations of some sort? So we are trying to come at this from a lot of different ways. We definitely want to assess the students, and we're working on that. We've conducted some focus groups with MSC Fish, who were the first organization to use it. And Sandy, do you want to say what, since you were in those focus groups, what some of the reactions were from the students?
Interestingly enough, one of our concerns was, would students buy learning in their co-curricular experiences? Would they think that they should only learn in the classroom, and would they be resistant to having a self-assessment or any kind of assessment of their work outside of the classroom? And so part of this is getting students to understand that learning doesn't stop at anybody's door, anywhere, and that it occurs 24/7, okay? Maybe I have to convince some of you of the same thing, actually, as I'm saying that. But the interesting things, there are very discipline-specific things here that are affected by it. Our STEM majors said that they didn't do any group work in their classes, and they didn't want to. They used their work outside of the classroom to get away from the classroom experiences. Our engineering students and the humanities students saw this instantly for use in group work in their classrooms, and say, I can do this and use these same techniques with how I work with study groups and things of that nature. They also, the beauty of it is they got the idea about the learning and the lifelong learning. Because one girl said, it's always so much easier to take it and do it yourself, because you don't have to worry about anybody else, coordinating anyone else. But I realized I was denying other people the ability to learn and grow when I did that. And so it was just like, wow. So someone asks me all the time how many students are involved in this project. As you can see, this is one of these things that has sort of some synergy. They start with it and then they grow with it in different organizational experiences. It's taken our website. You can get all the literature base and the rubrics right off of there to use. So I don't know how many people are using them. We get calls off campus all the time about this project from other campuses. Essentially, from a student affairs standpoint, it was how can we make sure that what we're doing in the out-of-classroom work with students is leading them to the core curriculum competencies. That's where we're going with this, so that their work with us is applied learning.
Yes, actually, I teach a leadership class for the core, and I used written communication, verbal communication, and critical thinking this past semester with my students, and it actually helps them get feedback. The verbal communication rubric I actually used with their peers. I passed it out and had their peers rate presentation skills for the students, and they got a lot out of that. I've gotten some good evaluation comments on that. We're still getting our handle on all of this too. A lot of how advisors are using these rubrics right now are self-evaluations with the students. Yes. Although I would also say from, when Katie was telling you about MSC Fish and hospitality and working with them and sitting down with them and giving them feedback, that's also a direct observation of what it is I see you doing. And so there is some crossover in that depending on how the advisor or the student leaders in the organization choose to facilitate it with the members.
And it's not just a one-time evaluation. We've set it up throughout the year. So we facilitated one actually in October, and we went through it. We'll do it again around February and then again in April, so that they will have a series of the rubrics to see how they've grown and specific examples for each.
Just to tell you that the number one thing that students told us when we did a lot of survey work in preparation for this, especially about communication skills interpersonal, was they wanted more faculty feedback. And the one thing that's built into this, if you use it the way it's designed, is they get the feedback they want. And I don't know I can't tell you why specifically they said that, but it was very commonly shared that they wanted more feedback about their writing skills, more feedback about their their public speaking skills, and so this gives them that. We don't have classrooms in the main where we have groups that have to take exams, okay? So a lot of our evidence is going to be indirect. We get as close as we can to getting more. You have it up on us that way.
Okay, other comments? My last comment is I just get so excited because my role here is to worry about institutional assessment. So usually I'm worrying about the big picture things a lot. And what gets exciting for me is here we have 3 great projects going on. One of them is with a published instrument as a direct measure that involves faculty and faculty judgment. And then the other one is very organic. Faculty are writing this rubric. Faculty, true, authentic work is going to be judged by our faculty. And then the third one is actually showing ways that our co-curricular contributes to our university level outcomes for core competencies. And so from my perspective, this is a great big fat yay. I get really excited about that concept. So, pardon me for being the one leaping about, but I just think that's neat. And also my shameless plug, we are going to have a great speaker come, Mary J. Allen from, her expertise, she wrote the book, Assessing General Education Programs, and she's going to be a keynote speaker at the conference, and hopefully she'll also be doing a 3-hour pre-conference workshop and helping us think through these things for ourselves and also for the other 100 or so institutions that will join us for the conference. So I hope you'll consider attending. Thank you.